I'm Rene Voogt from the Netherlands, and I have founded Connected Green already 3 years ago. It's a company that helps landscaping companies to save on water or on vehicle movements or on replacement of dead plants and trees. It's used for cities, municipalities, but also for sports fields. And the idea behind it is that it's a platform that combines technology with domain knowledge. Because only when the technology or when the output of the sensors is interpreted and translated into human language, that's when we can add value, or they can add value, IoT. So my personal background, I have a bachelor degree in geoinformatics. That's already a while ago. I was born and raised in the town of Boskoop. That's a known town in the Netherlands, or maybe even outside of the Netherlands, for their horticulture. So I always had a green thumb. I worked there during my study on nurseries. So I grew up with plants. Then I did this geoinformatics study. I worked for several companies like the GIS company called Esri. And after a while, I started to notice that it's not everywhere as green as I was used to in Boskoop. And also I saw the rise of Internet of Things. And I knew what was possible with software. So that's basically where my background, many things from my background were combined. And that's how Connected Green was born, basically, because I thought, hey, what if everybody knows green is important for our planet and for our cities to be resilient against climate change. But at the same time, it's very difficult for people to conserve and to maintain green spaces. And at the same time, everybody's looking at his phone the whole day, and IoT is rising. So hey, let's make a combination. So that's basically how it got started and how my personal backgrounds come together.
Cool, that's great. I'm actually thinking if you maybe turn off your video, because then and then I think we can see your face. Yeah, that'll be better, because then we can just hear you. Okay, and then so I think that's a really nice background, and I think what you have is you see how IoT can add value, kind of to create greener spaces. And you're totally right. Everyone's got their phone, and they can look at the data and make their decisions in real time. But if I ask you to describe IoT in your own words, how would you describe it?
I would say it is technology that should support or improve our everyday lives and our everyday processes. I think it's really something that should add value to simple and maybe even very old everyday practices.
Nice.
But it's not just technology. That's so, and I don't like describing things by what it's not. But to me, the IoT is not just technology at all.
So if we then kind of say, okay, it's more than the technology, and like what I like about Connected Green is that you really are kind of at the border of the technology, and then people who are using the technology who don't really care about how it happens, but they care about the results. So your customers are not necessarily high-tech people or tech savvy. They're using data maybe for the first time. How would you describe the ecosystem, kind of your supply chain within the IoT space, in order for you to actually deliver the kind of customer-friendly solutions that you're looking for, and what's kind of important to your customers?
Yes, well, this is an a fantastic question, because to me it feels like I'm kind of Don Quixote fighting against people who want to push their technology. Because this is the issue, right? When I started, I brought the SensorTerra sensors to the landscaping market, but for some people had already seen those, and the first thing they said is, "Yeah, but we already know those sensors. We've seen those before. It's not new anymore." And I was like, "Hey, this is not the point, right? Because it's not about the sensor, and it's not about the size of your antenna or the capacity of your battery. I mean, in the end, it is, because it needs to support a certain use case. But I have been able to shift the discussion and basically to drag it away from the bits and the bytes and the boxes, the bits, the bytes, and the boxes, because. And in the supply chain, so for example, I work with programmers, and as soon as I am, let's say, as soon as I am missing 1 or 2 sprint meetings, and I come back and I look at the results, I need to go sit next to the guys and say, "Look, this is how the customer is using it. This is where the customer." So, and they're like, "Well, but it's working, right? It's technology is working." Yeah, I understand it's working, but that's not how the customers or the end customers are using it. So I think that this is a continuous tension that keeps existing, and I think that many suppliers in the supply chain are not at all aware. And I think that the winners are the technology providers who are aware of the fact that their technology is being used in use cases, or in which use cases they are used.
Yeah, and then you also must have people who are kind of using data for the first time, who are kind of implementing IoT for the first time, or like IoTs might even be part of their language. They just want kind of results or smarter ways of doing something. What advice do you have when you go to them about them starting their own projects with IoT, so that they kind of don't fall and make the same mistakes that maybe others have done previously?
Well, that's another very good question, because they think they first of all think, okay, now I have technology, so now I have a sensor and I have IoT, so now I am, carefree. But that's not the case. So you still have to water your plants. But this technology is going to tell you when is the best time, for example. So what I do see is a couple of things. First of all, some are a bit reluctant to trust the technology. So I get sometimes a response from a customer like, "Hey, incredible, everything is working," right after implementation. So they are really surprised that it's working, which is of course a hurdle to take before serious results can be produced. Then most of the times in the second or the third week they start calling me, and I have different variants of the story, but sometimes they call me, they say, "Rene, the sensors are broken because our landscaper, he said he watered everything, but we cannot see it in the graph." Okay, let's take a look at the graph. "Well, but you see a little bump here." "Yeah, but they gave a lot more water than this little bump." "Okay, so where could the water have gone? Because if you see a little bump, then the sensor is working." Aha. So could it be that the topsoil is hydrophobic? Could it be that the water is flowing somewhere else? Could it be that... So there are many, many, many variables. And all of a sudden, all the eyes are, let's say, focused on the IoT solution. So it's, first of all, it's really trusting the technology. And then second, it's like, okay, if I give you a good microphone, it doesn't make you a good singer immediately, okay? You do need to take lessons, and you do need to practice, okay? You cannot think like, "Hey, now I have a good microphone, now I'm a good singer, now I'm Beyonce," right? although you wish, but I know. But the thing is, yeah, but that's how it works. And they think, now we have sensors, so now everything is good. No, now you see what's going on.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That's so funny. Because it's so true. You give someone the data, and it's all of a sudden not exactly what the data that they had expected.
Correct, what they were expecting.
It makes them ask for more questions, not just answer the one that they thought that they wanted to have the answer to. So yeah, you don't know what you don't know until the data's there, and then data doesn't lie. Also, it's there in black and white, and then you have to interpret it and use it as you wish.
Exactly. So I can give you two examples. One is with the municipality of The Hague. We implemented 85 small sensors there in hanging baskets throughout the city. And one was giving high values continuously, almost a straight line on a very high value. And they called me, they said, Rene, something's wrong with this sensor, really. So, and I was already planning to go there, you know, to go through the system with them. So we drove up to the Noordeinde, that's where the king actually has got a working palace. And we climbed up on top of their van, and what did we see? That the drain was stuck of this little hanging basket. So the whole hanging basket was filled with water. So it was correct that the sensor gave a very high flat value. And they were like, oh, we are sorry. And okay, but this, the customers, they need such an event like that, you know, to really understand what the data is saying. And another example is with the municipality of Veldhoven. They have replaced a number of trees, 200 or something, because of a storm damage, right? So they replaced many trees because they were damaged by storm. And then they ordered 6 or 7 sensors, you know, to get a feel of how these 200 should be watered. And then I got a phone call like, Rene, the system is really useless because every sensor is giving a different value. So how can I now use these sensors to determine when I need to water my 200 trees? And then I said, well, it would be more of a surprise if all the trees would give the same value. So that was also, you know, that required a completely different way of thinking. So now they have made, they have grouped the trees per sensor. So now they know, okay, we have cut up our watering route, so to speak. So just 2 examples.
Yeah, really nice examples, because it just shows how all of a sudden that data leads to completely different decisions, or you know, that identifies a problem you otherwise might not have seen, or changes kind of the work pattern based on that data. So both really nice examples.
Correct.
And just because some people might not be aware, can you just talk through kind of how many cities in the Netherlands that you now manage? So this is you're a Dutch company working in the Dutch domestic market only. But
yes, well, in the Belgian market.
Oh, now also Belgium. That's true. So could you just talk a little bit about kind of your customer base and kind of how that's grown over the last kind of year or two?
Yes, absolutely. So what we do see in the Netherlands is that, let's say, our first customers were the larger landscaping companies with, you know, with multiple project leaders and multiple projects across the country. For them, it was something that they thought they could use to plan their work, which they are still doing. But after a short while, their customers started to notice, hey, wait a minute, these are sensors, this is interesting. So I think about 2.5 years ago, we got our first municipality. And the interesting thing is that municipalities in the Netherlands are by far the largest owners of territory, right? I mean, or let's say maintainers. Yeah. So what you now see is that some municipalities, they buy the sensors themselves to organize their own work. There are also others who only work with contractors, so they basically prescribe it to contractors.
Yeah.
And the Connected Green platform has been built in such a way that sharing information is really easy on different levels. So the landscapers, they can very easily share information with a so-called viewer account to their customers. So we have a couple of larger cities like Amsterdam, and also the municipality of The Hague. By the way, The Hague has calculated that they are saving about 1 million liters of water, surface water, that they don't have to drive into town with tanks, just by being better able to predict when and how much to water. We also have towns like Groningen, Leeuwarden, Veldhoven. So basically it ranges throughout the entire country. But what we do also see, which is really funny, is that we have many, so we have tree or plant consultancy firms as our customers. And then we see names of other municipalities appearing in our system because they work for those municipalities. So I think we have about 30 municipalities now in our own customer base, but at least the double number of users from municipalities. So I think we are now up to 20 or 25% of the Dutch municipalities that are using our system.
Yeah.
In one way or another.
And it's such a nice kind of growth story that, and you know, we're looking at as part of these interviews, kind of smart cities and how all the different ways, and there's so many examples around smart buildings, smart parking, but it's nice to include the kind of the landscaping and just keeping the city greener whilst using a lot less water. So it's a really nice example. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, so if I go back then and kind of go back to the kind of key questions of the interview, it's then beginning to say, okay, well, how can we use some of your learnings to help others?
Yes.
What advice do you have? You know, we talked a little bit there about what advice you have for some of your customers, but what advice do you have for, like, you're a system integrator, so you're also kind of the, you use a lot of the technology or the sensor part of the ecosystem, yes, and then convert that into value creation for the customers. And you do that through a business model, also where you're charging kind of monthly fees and things like that. Do you want to just talk through some of the evolution you've had in your own business model or thinking over the years, because you've now been doing this for a couple of years, and just kind of what your learnings are on that side?
So just a couple of things. One is we have been thinking about different business models indeed. We are now basically selling the sensors with a margin, but we sell them, so we are not responsible for them anymore. And we've of course been thinking about, you know, adding the sensors to the monthly amount, but then we would be basically financing hardware for very large companies. So it could be done if you are highly leveraged, but we saw kind of a risk there to have to pre-finance all these sensors. So that's why we sell them with a small margin, and this is being accepted by the market. I mean, this is really this seems to be the standard now by now. And then we got this monthly amount where we are basically from the beginning already. We have a monthly amount, but we charge it per year or per 2 years or per 3 years. So this is how we have been able to finance building our platform. However, and this is towards the technology, I think for the technology, from the technology perspective, if you are building hardware, that's a very frustrating position to be in, I would say, because hardware is what I call a hygiene factor. Okay, it needs to be available. it needs to work really well. Okay, we are sometimes burying the probes. They need to be there for 3 years. I mean, it's practically impossible if you've buried one or just, just beneath the soil or under a cover. You don't want to go back to such a project with a couple of hundred trees and then to look for your probe and dig it up and whatever, clean it. It needs to stay there for a while. But that requires that you have really robust hardware. So it needs to be really good, but at the same time, it's a hygiene factor, right? So that's a bit of a contradiction there. But the hardware just needs to be, how do you say it? It shouldn't lead to any discussion or any doubts or whatever.
Yeah, it has to be very, very reliable and consistent.
It's got to be reliable, it's got to be consistent, it's got to be, it needs to have good support if anything goes wrong. But the point is that we basically are promising our customers that they have to, or that they can visit their projects less, right? So that, and some of our customers, they have projects at the other end of the country, so they are really saving a shitload of money. But then the hardware should not be the reason for them that they have to go there, right? To fix things or to. So like I said, the hardware is a little bit paradoxical, right? So it's a hygiene factor. It needs to work really well, and then you bury it, and you never see it again. But it's the foundation of your solution.
Yeah.
And then one of my big advices, but this is an advice in general, if you create platforms or if you are, if you are creating user experiences, go out with your customers. Go out placing sensors with your customers. Give them a sensor and say, look, there's a tree, place the sensor. See what they're doing. How are they thinking? The same goes for, just sitting next to them, configuring the platform and using the platform. Where do they click? Where do they expect certain functionality to sit in your application? And I know that this is very, because it's kind of nerdy, techy, right? The IoT sphere. But like I said in the beginning, the only added value for IoT is if you can support everyday processes for people who are not technology specialists, and they don't have to be, and they shouldn't have to be, right? That's how IoT is meant. It's your refrigerator telling you you need to order new milk.
Yeah, no, so true, and that was a nice kind of description there that you had. Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question, Rene, which is about success.
Sorry, about
success. So what?
Oh yeah.
What does success mean to you? And I think, with you're a father of 2 young children. You've founded your own business, which is now growing, and you're employing more people. You're having a big impact on landscaping in the Netherlands. That you're helping a whole industry transform. But there's also INT in general, and what success means there. So it's quite a big encompassing question. But I just wanted, kind of from your perspective, what does success mean to you?
Yes, well, okay, we are not a philanthropy, right? So it's important that the business makes money. However, I do think that in these times, where nothing seems to be the same, even as 6 months ago, right? Things are changing so rapidly, and there's a lot happening around us. So I do think that businesses need to have impact, right? Businesses need to be impactful. So I do think that a business needs to be viable at the same time, but it's already what you said. We are now changing the way how landscapers and municipalities in the Netherlands are watering their plants, making them more successful, right? So we got less brown plants. They are larger. They have more leaves. They grow in places where in the past it was impossible to grow. So for me, that's success too, right? If I visit customer projects and I see flourishing trees and plants. And I know that that's because they changed their routines. That's also success, I would say. However, I think the real success for IoT would be if we are able, as an industry, as a business, to have true turnkey plug-and-play solutions that operate as easy, as riding a bicycle. Let's take the Dutch analogy. But then, with this complicated technology in its belly, and with the domain knowledge in its belly. And now, the discussions are often about, like I also already said in the beginning, like, oh yes, our sensor is 14 centimeters. Yes, our sensor is 15 centimeters. Yeah, screw that. I mean, that's not what it's about. It's about what does it do? How does it help you? And I think then we are successful.
Cool.
As an industry.
Yeah, I think thank you for answering that in so many different perspectives.